Ladies and gentlemen, we often look at youthfulness as a gift of biology, an inheritance of genes, diet, or skincare rituals. But what if I told you that the aura of youth some women radiate has little to do with physical causes? That their seemingly ageless glow is the external symbol of a rare spiritual condition, one that transcends the physical body and originates from the soul. Today, we journey beyond appearances. We delve into the hidden world where symbols speak, where the psyche forms reality, and where certain women carry within them an ancient, transformative energy, a rare spiritual trait that keeps them inwardly and outwardly young. Youth in its deepest and most enduring sense, is not a matter of physicality but a manifestation of the soul's vitality. There exists a kind of woman whose presence defies the expectations of age. She may have gray in her hair or lines etched softly around her eyes, but her aura feels untouched by time. This quality, this inexplicable brightness, is not born of cosmetics or surgical interventions. It is the resonance of something far more ancient, far more enduring. These women are rooted in something that does not decay, the eternal. They carry within them the quiet, unshakable rhythm of a soul in harmony with itself. When they move, they do so with a grace that is not rehearsed but remembered, as if their body is following the steps of a forgotten dance that comes not from the mind, but from something deeper. Their laughter is not the laughter of denial or performance. It is the laughter of someone who remembers joy before the world taught her to fear it. She is not racing against time because she does not measure her worth by inch, she lives instead by rhythm, by intuition, by cycles and symbols, not calendars and clocks. There is a profound rootedness in her, a sense that her center of gravity lies not in how the world perceives her, but in how she perceives herself. This is not arrogance or pride, but presence. And it is this presence that radiates outward and takes on the appearance of youth. She is not clinging to anything. She is not resisting the years. Rather, she has become a vessel for something timeless to move through her. And that movement keeps her alive, alert, luminous. There is a difference between staying young and staying alive in spirit. She has chosen the latter, and as a result, she often receives the former as an unintended gift. Such women are not easily perturbed by the superficial. They are not chasing relevance because they are relevance. When they enter a room, they bring with them the vibration of someone who is deeply connected to herself. This connection is magnetic because so many have lost it. We are conditioned to believe that youth must be preserved externally, that it must be forced, bought, or displayed, but these women reveal another path entirely, one that does not rely on external affirmation. Their youthfulness emerges naturally, as a side effect of a soul that has never been exiled from its source. They are, in this way, a kind of bridge between worlds, the physical and the metaphysical, the temporal and the eternal. Their eyes do not look younger, because they are untouched by age, but because they have seen deeply and not turned away. They have seen their own shadows and met them with curiosity instead of shame. And this self-seeing, this inner gaze, brings with it a kind of lightness that lifts the face and softens the body. They are not weighed down by masks or facades. They are not trapped in the rigid armor of persona. Instead, they move with a softness that comes only when one has shed the burden of performance. There is no greater weight than pretending to be something you are not, and no greater freedom than finally resting in who you are. This freedom is not loud. It does not need to prove itself, it simply is. And in that quiet being, something radiant begins to take form. It cannot be bottled or replicated. It is not taught in self-help books or beauty magazines. It arises from a life lived in alignment with the soul's deepest values. From choices made not out of fear but from truth. And because she lives from that place, her very presence restores others. She becomes a mirror not of society's ideals, but of what is still possible when the soul is honored above the surface. And those who encounter her often feel, without knowing why, that they are in the presence of something sacred. Not flashy. Not youthful in the conventional sense. But sacred. Alive. Awake. There is a profound and mysterious vitality in women who carry them, the living presence of the inner child. Not the numb, helpless child who demands protection, but the sacred archetype of the divine child, that eternal flame of spontaneity, wonder, and imaginative power that dwells within the human psyche like a hidden spring. These women do not merely remember their childhood. They embody its essence in an uncorrupted, deeply integrated form. They move through the world with a kind of curiosity that feel touched by the cynicism that adulthood so often imposes. Their gaze does not dull with the years, because their vision is not bound to the external alone. They see with a sense of inward freshness. Life has not become ordinary for them, because they have not lost the capacity to be astonished. This astonishment is not dramatic or loud. It shows in the way they notice the light falling through the trees, or the way their eyes soften when they speak to an animal, or in the small, almost imperceptible gestures of tenderness they offer to the overlooked. They do not need to be entertained constantly, because they are never far from the creative source that generates meaning from within. This is the signature of the divine child within, the part of the psyche that remains unbroken by time, and that continues to generate life, not out of repetition or obligation, but out of joy. These women possess a lightness that is not superficial but spiritual, not immature but radically alive where others harden over time. Growing bitter and skeptical from disappointment, these women deepen into a kaivasaper play. Not the play of escape or denial, but of deep engagement with the mystery of life. They can cry with the same honesty they laugh, because they have not numbed themselves in the name of adulthood. They have preserved, not their youth in years, but their youth in spirit. This spiritual youth is not something they chase, it is something they protect. They recognize that the inner child is not a stage to be outgrown but a presence to be honored. And in doing so, they remain connected to the wellspring of vitality that so many lose touch with. They are not childish. They are childful. Their maturity is not a reaction to trauma, but a conscious integration of all that light has taught them, without sacrificing what once made life beautiful. The divine child in them has not been silenced by the voices of reason or societal pressure. It continues to speak, to guide, to question, to create. These women ask, why? And what if? With the same sincerity as they did when they were young, not because they don't know the answers, but because they understand that staying young is about staying in relationship with wonder. And this wonder is a sacred tool. It dismantles rigidity, it opens the heart, it melts fear in their presence. Others often feel unexpectedly safe. This safety does not come from control or power but from authenticity. They give permission to others to soften, to play, to remember what it feels like to be free. They do not impose, they invite. Their joy is not a performance but a transmission. It awakens what has been buried in others. The forgotten songs, the silenced questions, the abandoned dreams. They are not trying to relive youth, because they have never truly lost it. It has evolved with and matured within them, become more sacred over time. Their laughter carries the wisdom of someone who has suffered, and yet has chosen not to allow that suffering to sever her from her inner light. This rare spiritual trait, the living presence of the divine child, is what sets them apart. It is not taught in schools, nor is it often valued in a society obsessed with outcomes and efficiency, but in them it lives, quietly, joyfully, unbreakably. And it is this inner presence that keeps their spirit wild and their faces bright. Not because time has stopped for them, but because they have not stopped trusting the part of them that time cannot touch. And wherever they go, that energy goes too, untamed, alive, and radiating through everything they are. Radical self-acceptance is not merely a psychological milestone but a spiritual state of being, a silent rebellion against the endless noise of comparison, self-judgment, and cultural conditioning that seeks to fragment the soul and fracture the self. In women who appear to transcend age, this radical acceptance is not a passive resignation but an active embrace. An inner posture that allows them to be fully present within their own skin, regardless of how the world defines beauty or worth. They do not view themselves through the distorted lens of societal timelines or commercial expectations. Instead, they see themselves from the inside out, as whole and evolving, shaped not by perfection but by presence. This self-accepturates a kind of inner spaciousness, a sanctuary where the psyche can breathe, where the heart can unfold without fear of being judged or corrected. These women do not strive to erase their past, they carry it with reverence, as a sacred text written in the language of scars, joys, losses, and breakthroughs. They do not see aging as a failure of youth, but as a flowering of identity. Because they have made peace with who they are, they no longer carry the tension of needing to prove themselves. That release of internal conflict is what makes their energy so light, so radiant, so ageless in its quality. Their bodies may shift with time, but the essence that animates them becomes clearer, more distilled, more magnetic. There is no rigidity in them, no brittle effort to appear young or relevant, no war between who they are and who they think they should be. They do not fracture their identities into compartments of approval seeking. They do not shrink themselves into the safety of conformity, nor do they expand themselves artificially in pursuit of admiration. They simply are, and this beingness is what gives them their glow. When they walk into a room, they do not demand attention, but they receive it, because people can feel the absence of inner conflict, the settledness of someone who is not performing life but inhabiting it fully. This self-acceptance is rare not because it is impossible, but because it requires a fierce honesty, a willingness to see oneself without filters, without narrative distortion. These women have looked into the mirror of the soul and have said yes to what they found there. Not just the light, but also the shadows. They have stopped negotiating with their humanity. They have stopped waiting to become someone else. This deep acceptance brings coherence to the psyche, which in turn creates a natural alignment in the body. It's not the kind of alignment that comes from discipline or control, but from surrendering into the truth of who they are. And the body, feeling that safety, softens, opens, and radiates because they are not trying to control the world's perception of them. They become more deeply connected to what is real. They stop chasing youth as a goal and begin to embody vitality as a truth. Their beauty does not demand explanation or validation. It is not the beauty of symmetry or smoothness, but of harmony. Inner harmony has a visible effect. It relaxes the muscles, it clears the eyes, it restores the natural rhythm of movement. There is no tension in pretending, no anxiety in hiding. And that absence of distortion lets the deeper beauty of the soul rise unobstructed to the surface, where it reveals itself not in artificial perfection, but in a living presence that feels both grounded and transcendent. They are not defined by the roles they play, the titles they've held, or the approval they've gathered. Their sense of worth is no longer outsourced. They have withdrawn their energy from the game of measuring up, and instead invested it in the soil of self-intimacy. And that inner nourishment transforms them. It makes them magnetic not because they are trying to be seen, but because they are finally seeing themselves. Others are drawn to that light, often without knowing why, because it is the rare light of someone who is no longer running from herself, but walking with herself in wholeness. There is an invisible but undeniable radiance in women who remain connected to the vast, mysterious terrain of the unconscious. They are not simply logical beings confined to the sharp lines of reason or the rigid structures of external knowledge. Instead, they live in harmony with the unseen currents of intuition, dream and symbol. They are not disconnected from the depths within them where instinct speaks in images, where guidance comes not from the intellect alone but from the soul's quiet language. This connection to the unconscious does not make them vague or irrational. Rather, it grants them access to an inner intelligence that is ancient, fluid, and often far more accurate than the surface level knowledge the world tends to prioritize. They listen to their dreams not as random chemical occurrences, but as meaningful expressions of the psyche's voice, delivering messages from the parts of themselves that do not speak in words. They honor strange feelings, synchronicities, subtle inner movements, those flickers of insight that come like whispers in the dark and vanish if ignored. And they do not dismiss these signals, they follow them. They allow their life to be shaped by the deeper rhythms that come from within, not just by external demands or cultural timelines. This devotion to the inner world cultivates a kind of spiritual poise, an unshakable sense of self that is not easily disturbed by chaos or change, because they are not living solely from the surface. They age differently. Their energy does not deplete as quickly, because they are drawing from deeper wells. When a woman is in relationship with her unconscious, she does not spend her life trying to force outcomes or control every situation. She trusts the process. She allows the mystery to unfold. This surrender to what cannot be seen or explained brings with it a serenity that is deeply youthful. Not in the sense of naivety, but in the sense of inner freedom. There is no need to clutch or panic, no pressure to always have answers, because they understand that life is not a puzzle to be solved, but a path to be walked with open eyes and a listening heart. This connection to the unconscious also makes them profoundly creative. Even if they are not artists by trade, they know how to shape energy into form, how to transform moods into music, silence into wisdom, tension into movement. They are not merely consumers of meaning, they are creators of it, and in that sacred act of creation, whether it is a conversation, a home, a piece of writing, or a meal, they remain alive. Their spirit is never stagnant because it is always in dialogue with something greater than the ego. They do not fall into the trap of pretending that everything is in their control. Instead they dance with uncertainty. And that dance, that fluidity, is what keeps them feeling, and looking, so alive in a world that often encourages disconnection from the inner life. These women become quietly revolutionary. They slow down when others speed up. They withdraw when the world becomes too loud. They trust silence as much as they trust action. They do not need to be constantly visible or validated, because they have become intimate with their own darkness and light. And that intimacy makes them luminous. Not in an artificial or curated way, but in the way a candle glowed home that has forgotten its own light. They embody the truth that depth is beauty, that stillness is power, and that knowing oneself is the greatest liberation. Others are drawn to them not because they fit an ideal, but because they radiate something unnameable, an energy that feels safe, wise, and alive. It is the presence of a woman who is not only conscious but also deeply in relationship with what lies beneath the conscious mind. She carries the myths, the dreams, the instincts of 1,000 generations. She is not lost in her emotions, but she is not afraid of them either. Her emotions are not enemies to be managed but messages to be heard. And because she listens, she evolves. Because she honors the unknown, she becomes known to herself in ever deeper layers. And that is what gives her the glow that cannot be faked or forced, a glow that rises not from the surface, but from the soul. There is a quiet and powerful glow in women who have taken their wounds and transformed them, not by forgetting or denying them, but by walking through them with open eyes and an undefended heart. These are not women who have escaped suffering. They are women who have allowed suffering to refine them rather than define them. They have faced the dark nights of the soul, the betrayals, the losses, the failures, the grief that lingers in the body long after the moment has passed, and instead of closing themselves off, they chose to remain open. They did not bypass the pain, they did not turn it into a story of victimhood or bitterness, but slowly, with fierce tenderness, they turned it into wisdom. They became alchemists of the soul, learning how to sit with the fire without being consumed by it. These women have not avoided the shadow, they have sat with it, named it, and made it part of their wholeness. They understand that what we suppress becomes distorted and what we embrace becomes transformed. Their beauty, their light, their sense of peace is not the result of an untouched life. It is the reward of deep integration. They are not untouched by life, they are touched by everything, and yet they remain soft, and that softness is not weakness, it is sacred strength. They do not armor themselves with sarcasm or superiority. They do not numb themselves with endless distractions. They have become honest with themselves, and in doing so, they have freed themselves from the illusions that keep others trapped in cycles of performance and pretense. There is a subtle power in their presence, the kind that does not scream but steadies. They are not in a hurry to prove themselves because they have already proven themselves to the only person who matters: themselves. They have earned their own respect by being brave enough to face what most people run from. They have let their hearts break without letting their hearts close. They have cried in silence and healed in solitude. And in that silence they have met parts of themselves they didn't even know were waiting to be found. Now, they carry those parts with grace, not as burdens but as blessings, not as liabilities but as layers of depth that make them who they are. When you meet a woman like this, you can feel that her strength does not come from dominance but from depth. She is not trying to impress, she is simply being. And in her being is a vibration that resonates with truth. Others feel safe with her, not because she fixes them, but because she does not flinch at their truth. She has met enough of her own pain to hold space for others without fear or judgment. Her empathy is not performative, it is embodied. Her compassion is not an idea, it is a lived experience. This makes her beautiful in a way that transcends appearances. It makes her timeless, because the soul does not wrinkle and the heart, once opened in this way, continues to grow more luminous with each passing year. There is no bitterness in her voice, no urgency in her energy. She is not racing against time because she has already reclaimed it. She has learned to sit in the stillness of her own being and find peace there. And that peace, that unshakable center, is what makes her appear so young, alive, so magnetic. Not because she has avoided life's weight, but because she has carried it and allowed it to carve out more space for light. She is full of light not because she has always been happy, but because she has not allowed pain to harden her. Her joy is hard-earned and therefore it is rooted. Her eyes carry both sorrow and laughter, and that paradox is what makes her unforgettable. She is a map of everything she has endured, and instead of erasing those lines, she walks with them like sacred tattoos from the journey home to herself. There is something profoundly magnetic about women who carry within them the essence of the anima mundi, the soul of the world, not as an idea or philosophy, but as a living reality that breathes through their presence. These women are not detached observers of life. They are deeply embedded within its rhythms, attuned to the subtle interconnections that bind all things. They move through the world as though the earth herself were moving through them. Not in a poetic sense alone but in an embodied, grounded, sacred way. They carry a natural reverence for the ordinary. Not because they romanticize it, but because they recognize that nothing is truly ordinary when seen through the lens of the soul. Washing a dish, watering a plant, speaking to a stranger, every act becomes a ritual. Every moment becomes a chance to commune with something larger than the ego. This way of being does not come from effort but from alignment. They are not performing sacredness. They are simply living it, breathing it, embodying it in the texture of their gestures, in the silence between their words, in the way they look at the world with eyes that have been trained not just to see but to feel. Their connection is not to an abstract idea of the divine, but to the life force moving through everything. To the soil, the seasons, the stars, and the subtleties of energy that most people miss while rut some imagined future. They are not in exile from nature. And because of that, nature responds to them. Children trust them. Animals come close to them. Plants seem to thrive in their care, not because they are gifted in gardening, but because they tend to all things with love rather than control. Their youthfulness is not a trait they hold on to, but something that flows through them like clear water through an open channel. They do not block the flow of life by holding too tightly to identities, by resisting change, or by grasping at permanence. They understand that to stay alive is to stay in motion, to allow what is dying to die and what is being born to come forth without fear. Their bodies may age, but their energy remains fertile, creative and generative, because they are continuously renewing themselves at the level of soul. They do not stagnate. They do not cling to the past, they do not dwell in what should have been. Instead, they compost their experiences and grow something beautiful from them. Their past is not baggage, it is nourishment. These women are archetypal mothers in the deepest sense. Not necessarily through giving birth to children, but by giving life to everything they touch. They nurture ideas, people, projects, spaces, and even silence itself. Their presence heals not because they are trying to heal others, but because they are so deeply healed themselves. Not in the sense of having no wounds, but in having befriended those wounds and made them part of their medicine. When you are near them, you begin to remember yourself, not the self you perform, but the self you lost when you began to forget that you too are sacred. They awaken this memory not by teaching or persuading but by being. Their authenticity acts as a mirror, and in that reflection, others often begin to see the parts of themselves they had abandoned. They do not separate the spiritual from the sensual, the sacred from the human, the mystical from the mundane. For them, all things are interwoven, all things are alive, all things are worthy of care. And it is this devotion, not as dogma, but as daily practice, that makes them luminous. They are not necessarily religious, nor are they attached to spiritual labels, but their lives are prayers in motion. Their laughter is an offering. Their sorrow is sacred. Their aging is not a decline but an evolution, and every year deepens their connection to this vast, invisible tapestry of being. Their beauty is not youthful because it resists time, but because it is sourced from something timeless. And in a world that idolizes surface, they remain rooted in soul, which is why, no matter their age, they appear forever touched by something eternal. So the next time you see a woman who seems untouched by time, do not ask her what cream she uses. Ask her what truth she lives, what wounds she has loved into healing, what joy she has guarded like sacred fire. Because what you are seeing is not just a youthful face. It is the rare presence of a soul that has refused to grow old in bitterness, fear, or pretense. In a world obsessed with surface, these women remind us true youth is a spiritual achievement. Thank you.